Okay, we are going to now write the code for our subclass savings account. If you take a look at the bottom left-hand side of the screen, we're going to add an interest rate and we're going to have it calculate interest as well. So we're going to jump over to Java, to Eclipse, and I've already written some of the code behind the scenes. So let's take a look at what we got. I named it just savings when we go to create the account. And the first thing though that you're going to do if you are doing superclass subclasses in Java is that's called extending. So you are going to extend bank account. So this is required in order to get the relationship between a superclass and a subclass. Next, I created an instance field for the interest rate, and then I created a constructor that brings in one argument, and that one argument is going to set the interest rate to the current rate that is passed in. And then I have an add interest method, which is just going to do some simple interest. It's going to take and calculate the current interest earned, which is going to be the current balance. We could also use this dot get balance times interest rate, if that helps you keep in mind that it's the current object's balance that you are getting. You can use this operator if you'd like, or you can just use the get balance. And then it's going to deposit the interest back to the account. And so please notice I have not created a local variable here for balance because I'm relying upon the bank account balance variable. I should not create a local variable for balance, otherwise I might get corrupt data. If I did that, if I created some local variable here and I accidentally only changed that variable, then I would have a corrupt data. If I go to my bank tester, I added a few lines of code in and just said that we're creating a college fund account. It's a new savings account and it's at 2.5% interest. I'm going to deposit $300 and then we're going to test this. I'm going to just run this and see if this executes and what our output is. So I've got $300 to start with at 2.5%. That's a simple interest. It's calculating $7.50. So that would be 0.025 if I were to pull up a calculator to test that. My calculator, if I do 300 times 0.025, I get the $7.50, which is what we expected. So I am manually doing my desk checks. I'm not using JUnit testing to do any of that testing. If I had used JUnit testing, I would know that that would work correctly and I wouldn't have to do a desk check. Okay. Now there's a couple of other things that I want to talk about in this video because that was pretty straightforward, but there are some things that are going to potentially kind of hang you up. First of all, we created this default noargs constructor originally to do our JUnit testing. So I'm going to comment that out. If I go to edit, source, I can add a block comment to comment that out. If I do that, I want you to take a look at what happens to our savings account class. I now have an error message here. This error message says, what does it say? Implicit superconstructor bank account is undefined, must explicitly invoke another constructor. So what that is saying is that you don't have a default constructor. It's not defined. You have to tell me what I should do. Well, we really want it to use the constructor where you start with an initial amount. We want it to use the parameterized constructor here. The parameterized constructor has to have a value. So what that means is we probably need to change our savings account constructor to include an initial amount. So when I go to create a savings account, I not only need to know the current rate at which it's going to be set, I need to know the initial amount that I'm going to deposit. The next thing that we have to do, and this is kind of important, is that I need to call the base class constructor. Well, that's my superclass, so I can just actually use the word super and send in the initial amount, and it will call the superclass constructor and the initial amount will be sent to it. And then I will declare my local value here, and it is still yelling at me Let's take a look and see what the error message says. Initial amount cannot be resolved to a variable. I probably have a typo. Initial amount. There we go. So initial amount, so now that's going to send the value to the superclass. The interest rate is going to be set. The only other thing I need to do is in my local testing class, I have to tell it that I want to send in an initial amount of 300. So instead of depositing the 300 here, I'm going to send in the 300 amount, and that should produce the same results that we had before. So let's go ahead and execute our bank tester and see if we get the same amount. It says we have errors, so let's see what we've got. Oh, the JUnit test is now failing because we added or changed things up, and this is no longer valid. So I'm going to comment out that section, and there's nothing now in the JUnit test, so theoretically, well, it might actually want to have the fail test. I think that's what the fail test was to start with. Nope. So it says I have to add a body, which is just your curly braces. Set method to return type void. There we go. Maybe. And then we don't need, we got rid of one curly brace. So hopefully we will be able to run our bank tester now. If not, we'll go back and change that and see what happens. And so if we look, we do have the same $7.50 here. And so that shows you how to extend a class. It shows you how to use a parameterized constructor. We looked and saw how to call the superclass constructor from within a subclass. It is important that the superclass constructor needs to be called first. That should be the first line of code inside a subclass constructor that uses that. If we wanted to see what would happen if I just had the defaults, we could go back and play with that a little bit, but I think that's enough for this video. So we just extended the savings account class from the bank account class.